Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when one of the world's most unapologetic comedians faces off with late night's sharpest political satirist? Last night on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, viewers got an answer no one will forget. Ricky Gervais, known for his fearless humor and brutal honesty, joined Stephen for what started as a casual chat about comedy's role in today's culture. But when the conversation shifted to political correctness and censorship, the mood on set changed instantly. What began as playful banter quickly spiraled into a clash of ideologies. Stephen pushed the idea that comedy should evolve with social responsibility, while Ricky fired back with his trademark bluntness, arguing that policing humor kills creativity. The tension built with every exchange, the studio audience torn between nervous laughter and stunned silence. By the end of the segment, what unfolded wasn't just a debate, it was a cultural collision. And when Ricky Gervais finally stood up and walked off stage, the entire room knew they had just witnessed late-night TV history. Stay tuned, because this wasn't just an interview, it was a war of words that left everyone talking. The stage glowed in warm blues and golds as the Late Show audience erupted into applause. Stephen Colbert, wearing his signature wry smile, strode across the polished floor with effortless confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "please welcome the man who never met a controversy he didn't like, Ricky Gervais." Ricky sauntered in, casual, in a black t-shirt and jeans, grinning like a man who had already rehearsed the trouble he was about to cause. The crowd cheered as the two men shook hands. For a fleeting second, everything felt lighthearted, even friendly. Stephen began in his classic style, layered with sarcasm but framed as a compliment. "Ricky, you've managed to offend, let me check my notes here, everyone. Congratulations." The audience laughed. Ricky smirked. "That's not true," he shot back. "There are still a few people out there who haven't heard of me." The banter rolled smoothly at first. They joked about Hollywood, about Ricky's past award show roasts, and even touched on British versus American humor. But beneath the laughter, there was an undercurrent, a tension neither man could quite hide. Stephen leaned in, his tone sharpening ever so slightly. "You've said before that comedians should be allowed to say whatever they want, no matter how offensive. But do you really believe that's good for society?" Ricky's grin didn't falter, but his eyes flickered, just a hint of steel. "Yes, because if you start telling people what they can't joke about, you're telling them what they can't think about, and that's far more dangerous than a bad joke." The audience gave a nervous laugh. Stephen chuckled too, but his next line wasn't a joke. "But what about accountability, Ricky? Don't you think words have consequences?" "Of course they do," Ricky replied calmly, "but consequences shouldn't mean censorship. If a joke is bad, don't laugh. Simple. What we shouldn't do is act like hurt feelings are the same as harm." That statement hung in the air. For a moment, the applause sign flickered, coaxing the crowd to clap, but the energy had shifted. Stephen crossed his legs, smiling tightly now. "Interesting. So no responsibility whatsoever. Just let chaos reign." Ricky tilted his head, still smiling, but his voice cut sharper. "Stephen, comedy is chaos. That's the point. It's how we deal with the world being absurd. If people want safe spaces, go to Disneyland." The audience erupted in laughter, but the laughter didn't feel relaxed. Stephen forced a chuckle, eyes narrowing slightly. What started as polite sparring now had teeth. Both men knew where this was headed, and neither was backing down. By the time they cut to the first commercial break, the polite veneer was cracking. Ricky leaned back in his chair, arms folded, while Stephen shuffled his notes, the corners of his smiles straining. The next segment? That's when the gloves came off. The cameras returned from commercial to a visibly tighter stage. The smiles were still there, but now they looked painted on. Stephen leaned forward, clasping his cue cards like a man holding the last word. "So, Ricky," he began, his tone deliberately casual, "you talk a lot about freedom of speech, but some people say your comedy punches down, that it makes life harder for people who are already vulnerable. Do you see how that criticism might be valid?" The audience murmured approvingly at the question, and Stephen let the weight of it settle. Ricky crossed his legs and gave a small laugh. Not dismissive, but loaded. "I've heard that one before. But here's the thing, Stephen. A joke is a joke. It's not a manifesto. I don't wake up thinking, who can I oppress today? I wake up thinking, what's funny? If people start deciding what comedians can and can't joke about, you don't have comedy anymore. You have propaganda." The audience clapped, but Stephen wasn't done. "But humor shapes culture," he said, his voice rising just slightly. "If you're constantly joking about certain groups, doesn't that normalize prejudice? I mean, words do matter, Ricky." "Of course words matter. That's why I use them carefully, to make a point. The people who scream the loudest about being offended usually know the joke isn't real. They just want to control the conversation. And I'm not playing that game." The air in the studio thickened. Stephen gave his classic half-smile, the kind that hides a challenge. "You know, Ricky, it sounds like you're saying comedians should be immune to criticism." Ricky leaned forward, eyes glinting under the stage lights. "Not immune. Criticize all you like. Write a blog, send a tweet, boo me if you hate the joke. That's your freedom. But when criticism turns into silencing, when people lose jobs over a tweet from 10 years ago, that's not accountability. That's a mob." A ripple of applause broke out from the audience, but Stephen wasn't letting him have the upper hand. He adjusted his glasses, voice steady but pointed. "But isn't there a line? What about jokes that reinforce stereotypes? Isn't that harmful?" Ricky chuckled darkly. "Everything's harmful if you look hard enough. Someone somewhere is always going to be offended. If comedians start walking on eggshells, what do you get? Boring, sanitized comedy that says nothing. Is that what you want, Stephen?" Stephen hesitated, just for a breath, but then delivered his counter with precision. "No, Ricky. I just think comedy has evolved. We live in a different world now. People expect empathy. Punching down feels lazy. Why not use your platform to punch up?" That got a cheer from the audience. Ricky grinned, unshaken. "Empathy, of course. But empathy isn't the same as censorship. Comedy has to be fearless. If you start asking comedians to write jokes that please everyone, congratulations, you've just killed the art form." Stephen's voice grew sharper, his frustration seeping through the professional polish. "So, no responsibility at all? Just chaos in the name of laughs?" Ricky's tone dropped, serious now. "Responsibility lies with the individual, not the mob. If someone takes a joke as a green light to hurt someone, that's on them, not me. You don't ban cars because some people crash them." The audience erupted, some cheering, some groaning. The energy was volatile now, like a spark hovering over gasoline. Stephen leaned back, shaking his head slightly, his smile brittle. "You really believe that? That comedians hold zero responsibility for the impact of their words?" "I believe," Ricky said slowly, his British accent slicing the air like a blade, "that people need to stop acting like jokes are violence. They're not. They're jokes. The fact we're even having this debate shows how soft the world has become." A few audience members clapped, others booed. Stephen's eyes flickered with something. Anger? Resolve? He pressed on. "Or, maybe," Stephen said coldly, "the world has just grown up, Ricky." That line hit like a gavel. Ricky froze for half a second, then smirked.
Or, maybe, he leaned in, the world's grown scared. Gasps rippled through the audience. The camera zoomed tighter on their faces, two men locked in a battle neither wanted to lose. The laughter was gone now. The charm was gone. What remained was raw ideology, freedom versus accountability, crashing head-on under the bright lights of late-night TV. And as the second commercial break loomed, Stephen's producers scrambled, signaling frantically from off-camera. They knew Act 3 was going to be a storm. When the cameras came back from commercial, the studio lights felt hotter, the air tighter. Stephen sat forward, eyes sharp but calm, his hand drumming lightly on the desk, a rhythm betraying irritation beneath the professionalism. "Ricky," Stephen said, his voice lower now, like a teacher trying one last time before the lecture turns into a scolding. "You keep saying the world is too sensitive, but maybe, just maybe, it's about progress. Maybe people are tired of laughing at pain that isn't theirs." The audience broke into applause, and Stephen let it ride for a second too long, making the power play obvious. Ricky waited, unfazed, his grin curling into something that looked like a dare. "Ricky," said, leaning closer, his voice dropping to that conversational deadpan that made him famous. "Do you really think making a joke about a topic means I'm endorsing it? That's not progress, that's infantilizing people. You're telling adults they can't separate intent from offense. That's not empathy, that's control." A murmur rippled through the audience. A few people clapped nervously. Others folded their arms. Stephen exhaled slowly. Control, or accountability. Because last I checked, freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences. There it was, the line Ricky had been waiting for. He sat back, then lunged in rhetorically, his tone sharp now. "Consequences, sure. Don't buy a ticket. Don't laugh. But when mobs destroy careers over a joke taken out of context, that's not consequences. That's a witch hunt in designer sneakers." The audience roared, some in laughter, others in disapproval. Stephen's eyes flicked to the cameras, then back to Ricky, his jaw tightening. "You really think people calling out harm is a witch hunt?" Stephen shot back. "No," Ricky said coolly. "I think when someone tweets something stupid in 2012 and loses their job in 2025, that's insane. People change. The joke wasn't even about them. It was about context, about irony. But the mob doesn't care. They just want blood." Stephen straightened, his voice sharp now. "Or maybe people just want accountability from people with massive platforms. You have millions of followers. What you say ripples. That's power, Ricky, and power needs responsibility." That word, responsibility, hung in the air like a guillotine. Ricky's smile vanished for the first time. His voice dropped into a low, deliberate register, the kind that makes silence heavier than shouting. "Stephen, do you realize what you're saying? That a comedian, a bloke telling jokes, should carry the same weight as a politician making laws? That's madness. My job is to make people laugh, to poke at hypocrisy, including yours." Gasps from the audience. That last jab hit like a slap. Stephen's face froze for a beat, then cracked into a thin, icy smile. "So now it's personal." Ricky's laugh was quick and sharp. "It's always been personal with you lot. You dress it up as virtue, but really it's about control. Late-night hosts, media elites, deciding what's acceptable, handing out moral permission slips. And anyone who doesn't play along? Canceled. Gone." The tension was now electric. Even the band had stopped fidgeting. Camera operators leaned in, sensing the viral clip of the year unfolding. Stephen leaned forward, abandoning his cue cards entirely. "You're calling me an elitist because I believe in empathy, because I think jokes have impact." "No," Ricky shot back, eyes flashing. "I'm calling you an elitist because you think you get to decide where the line is. Not the audience, not the people, you. You think you're the referee of comedy. Newsflash, you're not." The studio erupted, half cheering, half booing. Stephen raised a hand for calm, but Ricky wasn't finished. He delivered the line that would detonate across social media within minutes. "Comedy doesn't need gatekeepers, Stephen, especially not ones hiding behind applause signs." The audience audibly gasped. Someone in the back shouted, "Whoa!" The sound guy hit the cough button a second too late. Steven's jaw clenched. He opened his mouth to respond, but the stage manager was already waving wildly. The producers knew this was spinning out of control. "Okay," Steven said finally, his voice brittle. "We're gonna take a quick break." "Of course we are," Ricky muttered, loud enough for the mics to catch. "We didn't want the wrong opinion on the Stephen Colbert show." The crowd exploded. Cheers, boos, phones held high, recording every second. As the band launched a hasty riff and the cameras cut, the internet had already begun writing the headlines. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a battle line, and Ricky Gervais had just drawn it live on late-night television. When the cameras returned from the break, the tension wasn't just palpable, it was suffocating. The applause sign blinked desperately, but the claps felt awkward, like everyone in the room knew they were sitting on a live grenade. Steven smiled, tight, rehearsed, brittle. "Welcome back. We're still here with Ricky Gervais." He glanced at Ricky like a referee checking on a fighter before the next round. "And we're having a spirited discussion." Ricky chuckled, low and sharp. "That's one way of putting it." Steven pressed on, his tone syrupy but edged. "Look, Ricky, I get it. You don't like rules. You think comedians should have no boundaries." "Not no boundaries, just not boundaries decided by a bunch of sanctimonious TV hosts in tailored suits." The audience groaned, a mix of laughter and unease. Steven's smile cracked. "So now you're accusing me of being sanctimonious." "I'm accusing you," Ricky said, leaning forward now, voice like a blade, "of pretending to fight for the little guy while sitting in a multi-million-dollar studio dictating what's funny and what's not." Gasps. Steven froze, then forced a smile, but his knuckles whitened on the desk. "This isn't about what's funny, Ricky. It's about harm. It's about people who hear those jokes and feel—" "Oh, here we go," Ricky interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. "Feel. Always about feelings. Do you know what comedy is, Steven? It's about truth. It's about exposing hypocrisy. It's about laughing at the absurdity of life, including our feelings. If you can't laugh at dark stuff, you're not protecting people. You're weakening them." The audience clapped wildly, half supportive, half nervous. Steven's lips tightened. He switched gears, going for the jugular. "So where's the line, Ricky? Racism? Misogyny? You okay joking about all of that?" Ricky's eyes hardened. "If the joke's funny, yes, because the target isn't the victim, it's the absurdity of the prejudice. But you can't get that because your comedy is just safe. Corporate safe." The studio went silent. That word corporate hit like a punch. Even the camera operator flinched. Steven's face flushed. "You know what? That's rich, coming from a guy who cashed Netflix checks bigger than this entire season's budget." Ricky laughed coldly. "Difference is, they didn't tell me what to say. You do. You dress it up as morality, but it's censorship with better PR." That was it. The audience erupted. Cheers, boos, someone yelling, "Let him speak!" Steven's producers frantically waved, but both men were locked in now. Steven slammed a hand on the desk, not hard, but enough to silence the room. "You think you're some free speech warrior? You're just a guy who likes saying shocking things because it sells. Don't act like it's noble." Ricky stood up. Just like that. Slowly, deliberately, the chair scraping loud enough to pierce the silence. He towered over the desk, eyes burning. "You invited me here, Steven, for a laugh, for a chat. But let me tell you something. Comedy doesn't need your permission slip. It never did." The audience gasped audibly. Steven, still seated, stared up, stunned. "You know what the difference is between us, Ricky," continued. Voice booming now, every word a nail in the coffin of civility. "I tell jokes, you tell people what to think.
And then he turned. No commercial break this time. No stage manager whispering in his ear. Ricky Gervais walked off the set. The camera tried to follow, catching him tossing his mic on the couch as a producer scrambled after him, mouthing, "Stay, please!" The audience exploded. Some cheering like they'd just seen a knockout punch, others booing in disbelief. Steven sat frozen, hands flat on the desk, jaw tight. Finally, he managed a brittle smile for the camera. We'll be right back." The band kicked in awkwardly as the show cut to black, but it was too late. Phones had captured everything. By the time the credits rolled, #GervaisWalksOut was trending worldwide.
By the time the credits finished rolling on The Late Show, the internet had already exploded. Hashtags like Gervais walks out, #Colbert clash, and #Comedy war dominated social media. Clips of Ricky standing up and delivering that final line, "Comedy doesn't need your permission slip," racked up millions of views within hours. Twitter turned into a digital battlefield. One camp praised Ricky as a free speech champion, declaring, "Finally, someone said it on mainstream TV." Others slammed him as a provocateur, hiding behind the banner of comedy, tweeting, "Shock humor isn't brave, it's lazy." Meanwhile, late-night pundits couldn't resist chiming in. Memes flooded Instagram. One showed Ricky walking off with a caption, "When HR says you can't make dark jokes anymore," while another mocked Steven with, "Corporate safe, the Colbert story." Even Netflix's official account cheekily tweeted, "We like freedom too, #Gervais," which sent Steven's fans into a frenzy. By morning, headlines screamed across major outlets. Ricky Gervais storms off Late Show after heated exchange with Colbert, The Hollywood Reporter. Comedy's civil war, Gervais versus Colbert ignites free speech debate, Variety. Ricky's mic drop moment breaks the internet, BuzzFeed. Podcasts dissected every second of the clash. YouTubers uploaded reaction videos with titles like, "Ricky destroys Colbert live," and TikTok edits turned Ricky's walk-off into a trending sound. As for Steven, the next night he opened his show with a tight smile and said, "Last night was eventful," before pivoting into jokes about airline peanuts. The audience laughed, but the elephant in the room was too big to ignore. And Ricky? He posted a single tweet, "Never apologize for a joke, ever." It had over 2 million likes within 24 hours. Love him or hate him, Ricky Gervais reminded everyone of one truth. Comedy isn't just about laughter. It's about the lines we draw, the rules we write, and who gets to enforce them. Last night, those lines blurred on live television, and the internet will be arguing about it for years. If you loved this clash of titans, hit that subscribe button for more celebrity showdowns, unfiltered debates, and unforgettable on-air moments. And tell us in the comments, should comedy have limits, or is everything fair game?